All right. This right here, this video about the ACL of Alabama. Excuse me. Check. I'm sorry, y'all. The SCL, the SCU of Alabama and Black consciousness. You know, the Sharecroppers Union was, in the 1930s, a group that was standing up for African self-determination. This group is not really talked about a lot in history, but this group gave birth to a lot of people, such as the Deacon self-defense. Later groups like Angela Davis' mother, who was in Alabama. She's from Alabama. She's from Birmingham. Her mother was in like one of the offshoots of the groups and whatnot, working with the party. You know what I'm saying? Back in the day, what you don't really read about, what they don't tell us, back in the day, communists meant black. You know what I'm saying? And there was a lot of stuff going on during this time, you know what I'm saying, in the 1930s, that, the Depression set in and stuff like that. And it's a wild time. I'm also reading a couple other books on like Henry Hay, Black Bolshevik, Henry Haywood, Black Bolshevik, and Cyril Briggs. Y'all should really read about them two characters right there. You know what I'm saying? Them guys really was deep and heavy in the game. Forget the communist influences or whatever. Really more interracialism, but you know what I'm saying, today. Excuse me. But there's a good black, some good black men and women up in here. But we're gonna focus on this right here. The SCUL, the SCU of Alabama Black Consciousness. In the crisis of the Negro intellectual, Harold Cruz raises the rights of the economy. They considers persistently a stumbling block of the progressive black leader. The choice between Marxism, Paul Robeson, Richard B. Moore, Richard Wright, the elderly W. Du Bois, or cultural nationalism, Marcus Garvey, Baraka, Stokely Carmichael. Cruz considered the latter position necessary for any meaningful social progress on the part of the African American and the unique nature of the Black American. Her history of corporal labor, exploitation, combined with the unique racism of the era place, required Cruz's estimation that race consciousness be fostered above of all any meanings of change happening in the street, and in the home, in the workplace. Although the title of his book was seen to restrict the application to the intelligentsia, Cruz made a careful adequate of the feelings of Paul Robeson, with high prices in Harlem, as well as those of the Communist Party setback in African American political leadership. That's another thing that many people don't know about this era too. The communists, the left, historically, racist. Hey, sick racist. You know what I'm saying? We gotta have another conversation one day about, about the wolf and the fox. But the fox is way worse than the wolf sometimes. Fox being a white liberal. Okay. So while this is going on, and stuff like that, we had to keep on. It was two things that the Sharecroppers Union in Alabama have portrayed, which is each of these, a Marxism type of thing and a black nationalist type of thing. And the writer is going to go through this. He's going to explain the difference of culture of Marxism, nationalism. Since the ideology necessary fools infidel, I argue that important to the oppression era of black sharecroppers and the consistency of Southern racism and the labor exploitation made fidelity, whether Marxism or Garveyism implausible and dangerous. At the Camp Hill in 1931, in Reeltown in 1932, black Alabama sharecroppers exemplify respect to flee to the paradox of racial inclusion and class solidarity and attempts at biracial cooperation, which uninvoked the physical conditions with the rights. This is considered an impulse in the dramatic of two cases of hardships in the Great Depression, a unique predation of Southern capitalist elites on sharecropper. We cannot delimit the ideology of the paper application to the proletarian struggle as father for intellectual leisure rather than spina in a Ghana Revolutionary Guard. So these people right here was the Revolutionary Guard of the 30s. You know what I'm saying? Took it out the history books. You know, let's see what they done. They got, like I said, we said about Camp Hill in Real Town. So let's see what happened at Camp Hill in Real Town. You know, as a 19th century 20th historian Robert D.G. Kelly put it, black communists were not blank sheets when they entered the movement. They had retained significant cultural influences that resonated through Lenin's wrappings, determining the everyday character of grassroots activity. Determining the everyday character of grassroots activity. From the start, black sharecroppers who joined the union did not necessarily endorse communist ideas, specifically the religious ones, even though they operated under the directive of self-determination and adopted Marxist critique of religious political use. These areas reveal chief obstacles to the party's attempt to organize a rural union that fostered international consciousness among the pastoral people, and that have denied a limited agency spirituality that the Alabama sharecroppers can claim. Although working class blacks often accepted Marxist theories of history as a class struggle, it was certainly endorsed by the party stands on black to self-determination in the South. Many sharecroppers, as well as Kremlin functionaries, were unsure how to assert that blacks constituted their nation, where they were found a high concentration in the Black Belt. And what changed the lived experience of violent racism, stifling political inequalities in the early stages of the SCU. One sees an undeniable contradiction of the attraction of Marxist theory, whose anti-Marxist religious populism. Black sharecroppers deftly appropriate both traditions and effectuated immediate necessary economic gains that the trade union delivered, while clinging on to the ultimate necessary spiritual goal of life, devoid of all suffering. There's no consequence, in other words, that Alabama rural communists favored one particular sort of clandestine meeting over all other places, the church. So they meet up in the church. You know what I'm saying? So now they meet up in the church, they doing their thing, they starting to build up. At the center of the relationship between the school teacher, what happened to the daughter of an Alabama sharecropper, and Tommy and Ralph Gray, admitted communists with a history of exploitation at the hands of white merchants and bankers, and stood to the newspaper, The Southern Worker, and the communist organizer from Tennessee, Mac Goals. Although the CFWU, later the SCU, was comprised exclusively of black tenant farmers and sharecroppers, the union made attempts to recruit white workers. Despite this de facto status as a union of rural black farmers, the union never took measures to radicalize their membership on a platform of racial unity. The Southern Worker, the Chattanooga-based communist paper, is perhaps most responsible for the union's privatization of maximum of economic advancement and rural worker solidarity and policy of racial inclusion. The publication's editor, James S. Allen, was a Jewish communist who penned many of the paper's cry for proletarian solidarity. The Southern Worker, he wrote in the paper first edition, is neither white paper nor black Negro paper. It's a paper for both white and black workers and farmers. It only recognized one in this division, and that's the bosses against the workers. In Allen's estimation, news about the Southern blacks sometimes predominate the pages of the Worker, but it's only at the persuasive economic destitution of the blacks. It's only because of the persuasive economic destitution of the blacks. Thus, the Southern Worker widespread audience in the Black Belt, many illiterate sharecroppers who even had papers to read to them, combined with the economic disparity endangered by the Great Depression, made a policy of cultural nationalism irrelevant. For the black sharecroppers have been keen enough to perceive the entities while providing for a family will never be addressed if the white businessman and landowner thought of the Union first as a group of black separatists. Unfortunately, the lure of the dollar provided a sufficient amount for the white elites to blacklist CFW members and recruit police mercenaries in the interest of both suppressing strikes and declaring illegal any private meeting or assembly of blacks. So, what's that in the Constitution? They providing legal, suppressing strikes and declaring illegal and private meeting or the assembly of blacks. declaring any private meeting or assembly of blacks illegal. That's crazy. So we couldn't even constitute together. We know this happened before, but they still doing it in the 1930s. They still do it now, really. Hey, the police in the corner see too many black folks. Hey, you run up there, what y'all doing? You know what I'm saying? It ain't like how it used to be. People be on the corners kicking and stuff like that. You don't even see that no more. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, where was I? After contacting the party, members and Grays helped build a union, secretly distributing the Southern worker to anyone interested in organizing and fighting for higher day wages paid in cash, more food advances to the croppers, and payment in cash for the work done by the croppers of the landowner's field, for seed, fertilizer furnished by the landowners to plant crops, food crops, for their family. Inspired in large part by the uprising of farmers in England, Arkansas, in which 500 farmers demonstrated against low return and high prices, the small Tuscaloosa continued, became interested in socializing, soliciting, and organizing. At the same time, the Communist Party was placing more stock in the ability of the sharecroppers to unionize. Events followed England to demonstrate the blueprint when an inexperienced organizer traveled in the spring in the form of Mac Goals, an illiterate black steelworker from Birmingham who unsuccessfully ran for municipal judge in Chattanooga, Tennessee on the communist ticket. In many ways, Goals was a typical choice for organizing the union. The party industrial organizers were nearly all white. In his position of authority to teach Marxist doctrines and organize grassroots mobilization and defeat objectors to a Nazis union. The fact that the CFW, composed of blacks from rank and file, the secretary combined with the growing membership of about 800 members, made the presence of the union far more menacing to local whites. It didn't want to go initially meeting only a handful of sharecroppers and private residents. So y'all want to see black people get together and form unions like that. Henceforth, why they kept us out of him. Okay, so he's down in so Matt Gold is down in Tuscaloosa, and he's getting stuff started. He's moving stuff around. Whoop-de-whoop, setting things on up. So palpable and worrisome was the rise of the tide of local whites that in July witnessed the union's first violent confrontation with the white power struggle. And this fall on the grounds of race consciousness, and in turn could be as well termed black nationalist impulse. So the white boy said something off the wall to him in July 1931, and that set it off. That set the union, the Sharecroppers Union off. Let's see what happens. Yet this post, as it become clear, was defined for black sharecroppers not to adopt a structural constitutive ideology. In other words, it was white consciousness that made necessary and expedient, and the reaction called for racial solidarity exhibited on the part of the Tallapoosa contingency. It's important to note that the hardships and starvation and joblessness felt beyond the sharecroppers' farm, which of course usually explain the party's attempt to factory unionization. And yet the sharecroppers' plight was still among the worst in the nation, to give destitute farmers their due agency. It can be said that the Alabama sharecroppers were willing to forego any radicalization of the union and hopes that a racistly inclusive platform would make their economic demands and strike conditions more plausible to the white power structure. Ultimately, black Alabama was forced to confront just how sanguine this hope was. For the 20th century, poor Alabama whites, as for their black counterparts, ideologically, in this case, the union professed the belief in racial unity and demonstrated attempts to recruit white members, not as sufficient for acceptance or legitimacy, though. It oftentimes eloquently called for a working class unity across racial lines, and seemed to be Alabama whites in particular and Southern whites in general, somehow fraudulently, especially in historical economic times, behind the all-black union. It's not to mention that the social relation that poor whites knew they would suffer if they became race traders by joining, and never became an object of local consideration. Even though it's not certainty that the downplay of the black agency in the slightest, it may be understood. The agency is relatively not in absolute terms. Its possibility and conditions are necessary structure within respect to the dominance that any violent oppressed minority group that does its own means of production will initially, of course, only have limited ability to constitute itself. Until 1931, the Union struck a delicate balance between the de facto black working class solidarity and both an expressive white influence via the Communist Party. It professed a desire for racial unity. The events of Scottsboro would change the balance of how the CFWU and its members worked further towards black nationalism, the end of Cruz's binary contender. So, the Scottsboro boys is a famous case in the 1930s where these boys, they said they raped these white girls who was dressed like men. You know what I'm saying? But when they found they was dressed like men, so you know what I'm saying, when they found they was girls, they said, y'all don't want to get in trouble, say them boys raped you. You know what I'm saying? And you know, one of them escaped to New York. You know, I was reading about that, you know what I'm saying? Harry Haywood met him in New York. You know what I'm saying? He got down, he escaped prison and stuff. But the Communist Party was real deep into that. You know what I'm saying? Okay. So let's get down to this. To add benefits to the white elite and landowners, a violent clampdown on the Union, a probable dearth of oversight and tendency practices, determining the role of the local police play in attempting to suppress the Union, and ultimately the Camp Hill shootout. So this is their first shootout they got with the police. Camp Hill. Gotta understand, they didn't, you know what I'm saying, they weren't taking no mess. They were standing up for theirs. You know what I'm saying? This how we doing. We feeding our people. We got love for our people. Whoopty whoop. You know, we ain't gonna take that. That's what's gonna happen. Chief of Police J.M. Wilson and Sheriff Kyle Young, a man with a reputation for handling Negro prisoners in a rough manner when making arrests, had seized CP, Communist Party, literature from the houses of the Negroes throughout July. In an attempt to stifle the Union culmination in a concerted effort on the part of the sheriff and his deputies to break up a July 15 meeting at a local church located 6 miles from Camp Hill. There were 70 to 80 black men and women who came to a regular meeting to listen to Matt Golds and Union organizer Tab Holmes discuss the CFWU and its plans to support the Scottsboro boys. After arresting Union member Jasper Kennedy for possessing a score of Southern workers, so you couldn't even have the literature. They was arresting you, you had the literature. A posse decided to pump Tommy Gray's family for information. An assault and interrogation on Gray's wife, who suffered a fractured skull from the abuse, yet only yielded a confirmation that the CFWU sole non-economic platform was to release to Scottsboro's 9. The crime justified the assault and beatings, so the police beat up his wife and everything. According to Camp Hill Police Chief J.M. Wilson, was in possession of literature that demanded social equality with the white race, $2 a day for work, and a mission to demand what you want. If you don't get it, take it. Despite the violent visits upon the Union members the previous day, Golds decided on July 16 to hold another meeting in the vacant house in the southwest of Camp Hill to express discussion to draft resolutions committing the miscarriage of justice in the Scottsboro trial. He decided to post sentries around the meeting place in case Camp Hill police or Tuscaloosa Sheriff Office decided to raid the meeting again. They did it. They did, acting first to discover the location of the Golds. Oh, that's fucked up. Okay, let me read this. And they did. Acting first to discover the location of Golds, scheduled meeting, and was tipped off by a black minister that he was indeed planning another one of his radical meetings. The traditional defenders of Southern womanhood beat S.M. Meltzer senseless in trying to get a location to find a meeting, the former of which he disclosed before collapsing with a fractured vertebrae. Damn. The police just beating the hell out of their wives. Fractured old girl's skull, broke this one vertebrae, a fractured vertebrae. As Mary Church in the southwest Camp Hill, about a quarter mile from the vacant house was doubled as a church. Sheriff Young, Chief Wilson, and 2 deputies spotted a figure bent over with a large bundle in one arm and a shotgun slung on the other. The sheriff pulled the car off and demanded revelation of the bundle of contents. "None of your damn business," replied from Ralph Gray. When Young reached down to pull his gun and demanded that Gray put his hands in the air, Gray unloaded both barrels of his shotgun, spraying birdshot to the sheriff's sides and Deputy A.J. On's arm. Young fell back into the car, and Wilson and his deputy immediately opened fire on Gray, who fell to the ground before he could reload. Leaving the bullet-ridden body of Gray on the side of the road, Chief of Police Wilson rushed to the birdshot Young and back to Camp Hill, screaming that anyone of all y'all who will listen, the niggers shot a sheriff all to pieces in a gunfight so loud and intense it sounded like no man land from a decade ago. A local doctor escorted Young to a nearby hospital for treatment. Ralph Gray's fellow union members carried him to his home, where along with Golds and Gray family barricaded themselves inside the house, expecting retaliation from Young agents. A call was placed in the town for a doctor that gave a small group of unions away. And Chief Wilson was duly informed of the perpetrators of the violence were gathered at Gray House, and Gray himself was yet alive. Wilson then sent two officers over, J.M. Grant and A.E. Alfred, to finish the job he had started. But when they approached Gray House, two mercenaries were meted by gunfire from Negroes in shacks and several other Negroes in the woods nearby. Reinforcements arrived in the form of a 50-man posse led by Sheriff Wilson. The officers retired and active fire over 500 rounds into a two-room shack. The man continued to see the Unions fire back, holding them off long enough for everyone but Gray's family to escape. When Wilson posse finally entered Gray's home, they find Gray lying on the bed and his family hunted around in the corner. Only two of whom, surprisingly, were injured. Although Birmingham Mirror papers reported a version of what the Age Herald and the News did, namely that Gray received wounds in the gun battle that finished him, or he died en route to jail. Gray family witnessed and reported to historian Robert D.G. Kelly a different document, which only the Southern Worker collaborated, which is their magazine. Someone in the posse, Tommy Gray stated, "Poke a hole in my brother's Ralph's mouth and shot down his throat." It is unclear whether Gray was already dead before this happened, but the posse was not yet satisfied that revenge had been served. They burned Gray home to the ground and dumped his body on the steps of the Jaysville courthouse. This the damn police. The police taking the body and just dumping it in the courthouse. Hey, the history book don't lie. This is the SCU of Alabama and Black Consciousness. You know what I'm saying? The book don't lie. So you know what I'm saying? That's what happened. Days immediately found the gun battle at Ralph Gray House. Days of the battle at Ralph Gray House. Witnesses large-scale white paranoia through Tuscaloosa County. An impulse that consumed local law enforcement as well as privately families, determined to protect themselves from the advancing Negro Reds, who were thought to be assisting Tuscaloosa sharecroppers in their bloody revenge campaign upon the white landlords, and particularly their wives and children. Within 2 hours of Gray's death, late Thursday night, more white men within 20 miles of Camp Hill had armed themselves with pistols, sawed-off shotguns, rifles, and about 500 of these men spent the early hours on Friday morning patrolling the highways, seeking to round up, injure, or kill any possible culprits. Most of the Friday daylight hours were consumed in search of the unknown communist organizer behind the Union, Mass Gold, who had fled all the way to Atlanta in the short hours since he escaped the Freddie Gray shack. Most CFW members were in less in demand, hiding out in the forest in the basin until Saturday evening, when the white posse had significantly avenged themselves. Undermining the party's initial claims that the working class starvation lay at the crux of the Camp Hill disturbance, it was the Croppers Union. Although it had white croppers in its membership, these terrible fears of a race war revealed the actual tender for the Camp Hill explosion was the racially divisive Scottsboro case that the party legal arm of the International Labor Defense was spearheading. So that's the first shooter they got into. They killed my man. They beat his wife, the police. They popped the cops. They did their thing, you know. But let's see what happened next. That was their first shootout. You know what I'm saying? So since that was their first thing, shootout, whatever. Okay, let's see what happens next. Attempt to show malice intentions on the part of the communists appears perhaps predictable in the NAACP report of the uprising at Camp Hill. And he reports in the New York Times, William Pickens, a field representative for the NAACP, deplored union members as misfortunes of being sharecroppers. Damn, that's sad to look down on them like that. And upon with the further ill luck of having communist politicians come in and mix politics with the Scottsboro case and their simplest desire to escape the conditions of being sharecroppers. The factual inaccuracy of his statement and the combine of the presumption that the members of his own race can only be galvanized by racial injustice to make Pickens statements representative of the mainstream liberal attitude after Camp Hill. Pickens was too willing to blame the speculative communists for the sharecroppers' action, even though he was already in actuality laying to blame the spear on one black man, Matt Goals, the only party member in the communist organization closely with the ties to the Union. So the NAACP blame the Communist Party. As minorities, politically and socially on the basis of race and economics of the ground and class poor, Alabama blacks were hemmed into a box of responding. This is not to deny the creative agency of such minorities, but express that such agency does not occur on a terrain favorable for the oppressed, but also on a terrain defined by the oppressors. This act of heroism, yes, he's a hero, Ralph Gray. Give it up. Hey, look up Ralph Gray. You know what I'm saying? The Sharecroppers Union, Alabama. That's a hero. This act of heroism of Ralph Gray and the actions of his fellow union members at Camp Hill is crucial to understand the color of their resistance, which is defined by the nature of what they were resisting: violent retaliation from a highly charged Scottsboro case. In this sense, then, the protective impulse of Gray and his fellows and the racially obscene national terrain on which they took a stand was not a creative repression, it was an expression of the tenable international platform of self-determination, I dare say it, black nationalism, but a protective nation akin to those taken by Robert F. Williams in Monroe County, North Carolina, and responding to radicalization from the SCU was twice removed. It should not surprise this event take a strong nationalist character, not just a militant one for one's own safety, the safety of oneself, but the binary struggle of white versus black, as is the much more dominant in black national tradition, black power NOI. It's also no surprise that the later black radical traditions and the CFWU early struggles have shared a common oversight of misunderstanding and placed the women in the revolutionary movement and their capacity for leadership. The masculine-centered version of the militant resistance is often distorted and true. The indispensable roles women play in the era and organizations correspond to seal that ground in much of the CLU activity. In both traditions, there's a perpetual need for self-defense and seeing the school scale of the trait valuation towards the masculine one. So when a homogeneous groups of whites commit a violent and threatening act against a homogeneous group of blacks, the default position left over time and time again was a reported masculine one of the militant racial identity and the subsequent violent action of nationalism. To use True's word, self-determination, to use a vehement phrase of the CP, perhaps then we should not be surprised at the challenges of pride and immediate threats against the life of an exclusive protector and nationalist instincts, where challenges provide a direct intel against life. It is that of those economy against property and goods invoke an exclusive and permanent yet no sacrificial instinct. The defensive nature of resistance at Camp Hill only affirmed this. Gray opened fire first, but only after the violence of the previous day, and only after seeing the careful armed white man approaching his largely defenseless meeting attendees. To summarize it up, the Scottsboro case, along with the mortal wounding of Ralph Gray, clearly temporarily and subordinately, whatever class unity of the member felt the collective identification with other members of the black side of the binary struggle forced upon them. All right. So that was that shootout. You know what I'm saying? That was the Camp Hill shootout. One of the first black national shootouts of the 1930s. You know what I'm saying? Led by what they call black communists, but they was, Sharecroppers Union. And so that's the first one. Let's just cut into the second one in real time. So, you know what I'm saying? We're cutting the second one in real time. They had to go to some changes and, had to go underground. But they still kept, but after that, that lure spit out that they wasn't afraid. So they stuff kept building, throughout the South. Mainly Louisiana, probably Georgia, Tennessee. We'll see. Definitely Alabama. You know what I'm saying? Yet Murphy horizontal leadership strategy fostered the presence of all guns of all kinds. Shotgun rifles at SCU meetings, which share more in common with radical nationalist meetings than trade union activities. Yet the real-time shooter, as we will see, proceeds strictly from class identification and the collapse of the false dichotomy that reserves militant black action solely for radical nationalists and not for the Marcus Pursato integration of sheep and wolf clothing. So let's see what this about this next one. All right, let's get into it. All right. Ned, focusing on the Ned cop, alias Nate Shaw. Initial satisfaction with life of a sharecropper was the bank and the mortgage lender, W.S. Parker, or Mr. Watson as his alias in Ned autobiography. As well as a system of capitalist usury that allowed racist consideration the length of the terms of such loan. He tells the story of a bank attempt to defraud him, and during the violence of the real town which occurred during the violence of the real town 1932. An established bank took as a safeguard the abuse of landowners like Parker, who not only fixed my mortgage on stuff without asking me about the odds of any, just fixing it like he wanted to, but also he was succeeding in making Ned sign away all his farmland, animals, equipment, and it was not for Ned's literacy of his wife, Hannah, who stepped in the last minute to read the loan contract and relaying on Mr. Parker's word. Yet the representation of an unbiased colorblind capitalism in Ned narrative was a man, Mr. Gracie, who treated Ned fairly 1 year ago and paid off his loan at the bank, ultimately capitulated to the will of the local elites like Parker. The note I just paid at the bank paid Mr. Gracie, he handed it to Mr. Parker. Oh, it hurt me so bad the notes weren't any good to this man. He couldn't collect a dime. He was showing me that Watson wanted from me. His plans was naked me as a baby. Such instances, Ned passed to shape the role of the real-time confrontation exchange of gunfire between SUC members and local law enforcement, with the latter bent on executing the will of the white landlords and creditors rather than the hallucination of racial superiority. So this time, the police is coming, there's a lot of things happening in the 30s during the Great Depression. The police are coming to take your stuff away. They kick you out. You seen it in the early 2000s, too, under Bush, when the police are coming in, the sheriff, the people weren't having that. You know what I'm saying? Where we gonna go? So, that's what kicked off this one. You know what I'm saying? So this what kicked off this one. Anyway, so they got into it with the police. The police tried kicking the door. It was the same cop last time who got shot in the stomach. That Shane deputy. This time he got his mind right. You know what I'm saying? He wasn't gonna jump out there and about the same thing happened last time. So, let's see. We only got like 10 more pages left. All right, so he tried to go get. So the white man tried to go get the stuff. And he had 2 black kids with him, and they put the gun on him. Said, "No, we're not gonna do that." He said, "Fine, I'll go get." He tried to treat niggas well. You know what I'm saying? So they went on down there, tried to get him to move, and it was, Dansville deputy and not a unusually gunshot Sheriff Young had sent reinforcements to 2 saying ex-police getting an offer who rallied rain bullets on Great Shack and Camp Hill. Although several James friends came to the house for protective intentions, armed victims with shotgun and old Civil War musket, everyone, including James himself, upon hearing, ran out of there like scared rats. I don't know, the wool pile, all running back and gone to the swamp and woods where the sheriff couldn't see him. Everyone except for Ned Cobb, armed with nothing but a .32 Smith & Wesson. Ned stood his ground as the four man positioned himself around James' house in an awkward silence. Both Ned and James Foster did nothing but stare menacingly at one another. The sharecropper slowly tried to back from the porch into James' house. One of the ex-officers attempted to seize Ned's arm and reaching with no uncalled aggression. And reacting with no uncalled aggression, Ned just flung him loose from the arm and continued moving slowly from the house for cover. Before he reached the threshold, an ex-officer fired 3 shotgun blasts in Ned's upper legs and hip. Making it to the hallway of the house, he turned and fired his entire clip at the 2 closest members of the posse, all whom took cover behind the trees in James' yard and fled when he reloaded. I don't know how many people they thought there was one in the house when Ned and used several decades later, but that 32 Smith & Wesson was barking and too much for him to stand. Limping away from George Hospital's surrounding fields, grimacing only from the lead in his body, but also the sight of John Allen's lifeless corpse. Ned noticed that 5 or 4 armed Union members ironed themselves and proceeded toward the source of the shotgun. They decided to stay in the field to prevent any more trouble. Ned slowly made his way around the home to ensure his family's safety. Seeing the severity of his wounds, Ned's son immediately drove him to the Tuskegee Hospital, where his wife tended the best as she could to the wounds. Since SCU Secretary Al Murphy had given strict orders for members to conceal their relationship with the Union, Ned elected not to tell the doctors the true story of how he sustained the wounds, chalking himself up between a riot between blacks and whites, a believable story given the violence of the year before. Despite their sympathy for Ned's plight and their diligent work of removing the pellets from his lower body, the black doctors refused to admit him for the night, fearing white surprisal. That's fucked up, Tuskegee. Ned's wife, Hannah, then hid him in a nearby Macon County at the house of her cousin and resolved to leave Ned there until Reeltown and return to Reeltown to gather their children and hide at the house of Union member Judge Sampson, who was located a mile from James' house. Before arriving there safely at Sampson's house, Hannah disclosed Ned's location to her brother, Milo Bentley, who promptly left Reeltown to join Ned and Shaw in Macomb County. That same day, Tuesday, separate armed bands of whites, many of them which were led by police officers, began the task of apprehending black Union members. Local police had discovered a partial membership list in an exhaustive search of James' place that was conducted in the early Tuesday morning. A posse of armed whites caught up with Ned's son and threatened to drown him if he didn't tell them where his father was hiding. Vernon Carter was spared, but only at the expense of putting bloodthirsty vigilantes on his father's trail. The same night, despite Ned upbraided Melo for foolishly endangering himself. You had no business coming down here, Ned told him. They're going to rally against the devil. They're going to rally and raise the devil and shoot folks and kill them until they find me. And now you're here too. Ned fully understood the consequences of resisting the institution of capital, giving no quarter to the prospect of the near-fatal escape of nostalgia and real-time police was significant blood tribute for his defiance. Annoyance of Milo became quickly and turned to iron concern when his brother-in-law heard cars roll up to the house. Ned immediately urged Milo to flee to the nearby woods. Although Milo was not among those who left James' house, Ned had a sinking feeling that his approaching posse would overlook the fact that he was acting in revenge. Instead of giving Ned his gun to conceal himself in a nearby corpse, Milo ran to the far side of the house, firing wildly at the police as he ran, falling quickly to the ground as they responded with dozens of bullets. One of the loud blasts, Bentley breech loader expired. Ned knew the posse would come in from next, and they did that. Instead of taking revenge through violent and extra legal means, they transported to Macon County Jail and lended an air of legitimacy to their actions. They brought Bentley's fatal wounded body along too, as well, thereby delegating the vengeance to the Alabama justice system. After 3 days, Ned was transported from a dying Milo Bentley, who refused medical care, to Danville Jail, where he awaited charges of assault with a deadly weapon by Judge Sampson, who had been beaten severely. And when it was discovered that Ned's wife was taking refuge in her home, a white farmer named Allie White, who had sympathetically intervened to save the Sampson from death by blow trauma from Sam and Clinton Moss, two union members who had not been tried for the shooting and firing a shot through the whole uprising. All five was convicted with assault and deadly weapon. Ned received the harshest time, 12 to 15 years. Sam Moss received the shortest span, 5 to 6. Ned had to count the barn as much as he had farm equipment and losses of horses, because of his family was run off that place. In the days after Ned's arrest, the riot crowd came and ripped what I had. Said, as for Clifford James, he suffered the same fate as Bailey. He died in jail because of insignificant medical care. So they just, you do that stuff, that's going to happen to you, Anyway, this is a militant black militant unit that should get credit for what they done.